G'day and welcome to another episode of Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today I've got David Mynott from Second Dawn, a sustainable building company in Perth, and we're chatting about the future of sustainable building being here and now. And I'm really excited to have him on the show because I just don't see this being talked about enough out there. So I really wanted to pick his brain on what is sustainable building, what is a passive design and a passive home, and how do we incorporate all of that to actually get savings across the longer term and do great things for the planet. So lots to talk about today. Really excited to have David on the show. Let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
G'day, David. Welcome along to the podcast. Really excited to be bringing our listeners a bit of a different topic today on sustainable building. So welcome along.
Yeah, thanks, Jared. Thanks for having me today.
So how did you get into this field and how did it all start for you? I know you've got a sustainable building company now, but you don't just wake up and start a business like that. Give us a bit of your background.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I started building when I was 17, so straight out of high school, and I started out in the country. We did a lot of timber frame homes and like brick veneer. It wasn't until I came to Perth that we started doing a lot of that double brick, the classic sort of brick home in Perth. And
the build type everyone has to have here.
I know. So throughout life, I've had good opportunities to build elsewhere and around the world. So around Canada and on the east coast of Australia. And it's obviously all predominantly timber frame homes in those areas. So when I came back from my travels, my building diploma to get my registration, and during that, we had to do a sustainable component. And the ironic thing is that was probably the class I paid off the most and just didn't really, I sort of thought, yeah, cool, all right, just we should recycle better and use double glazed windows. I got it. But then it wasn't until I had that epiphany moment where I was watching, sort of shows us what our planet's going to look like, in the next sort of 20, 30 years. And I thought, geez, I'm still around then. And it really didn't look good. And I just had a moment where I thought, well, but what can I do? I'm a builder. And so it was that moment that I kind of did a real deep dive into, well, can we be building better? And the short answer to that is, yeah, we absolutely can. So that was the beginning really of Second Dawn.
So that's your building company today, and you are focused on sustainable building. Tell us a bit about your company and how that's, I guess, positioned in the market.
Yeah, sure. So my background, like I said, is carpentry, and that was all in home construction. I had actually, previous to this, was running a carpentry construction business, and we did some real large-scale timber projects, notable one being the Rottnest Hotel Sandfire. And, so I guess, the importance of that project at the time was that was West Australia's largest timber frame project. And it really sort of, I guess, encapsulates that it can be done here and that there is a place for it. And, obviously I jumped on board with all the home builder grants that was available. So we had clients that wanted brick homes, but with the issues we're having with bricklayers at the time, I was able to convert them to go into timber frame and, really leaning on, well, it is a really good product, a sustainable product, etc. And what was interesting at that time is the people that converted were often that younger generation. They could see the benefits of that. It was the older generation that just could not convert. They just wanted that double brick. That was them, And so that was that. But during that whole time, building the last 2 years, that's when I've just been soaking up as much learning as I can around passive design, sustainable materials, and just different techniques that people use around the world. Obviously, Europe and America are leaders in this, but I've just been able to collate that and go, well, there are things that we take and adopt and put into our climate. We're just fortunate that we've got a real sort of moderate temperature climate here in Perth. That's how we can get away with inefficient energy brick homes.
Okay.
But there's just some real easy things that we can do that enhances a home. But the predominant feature in that is it's going to be a timber frame construction. So yeah, that's kind of how I've come to realize that there's such an important to do this. It's like we are getting some real good inquiries, and often the conversation is, we can't find a builder that understands these practices, and like you have clients trying to educate builders how to build passive.
Yeah.
And they're just like, this is great. You understand what we're trying to do. And, I think on the backside, the importance is, what I'm trying to do with this company is draw a line in the sand, go, how we built back then, we didn't know better. We didn't know about energy efficiency and carbon emissions and greenhouse gases and global warming. We do now. And we can, with all the data we have now, we can see that the way that we're building is not sustainable for our future.
And it's certainly becoming more and more important to more people. Why else do you think that is? Like, what else are you seeing that is shifting that focus for people? Is it just more the awareness and now all believing more that we have to make a difference? And if we don't look at doing that in all areas of our lives, then what's going to change?
Yeah, that's right. And definitely does start with that education. And there's been so many good companies before mine that have really started a lot of this. Like, they've done all the learnings that I've been able to soak up and then introduce into what we're doing in our homes. So it's been taken, I think, quite a few years. You're looking at about 20 years of people trying to build better. And we're just finally at a point where it's easy to implement. The products are available and the techniques have been sort of developed so that they're efficient as well. I'll admit that one of the biggest barriers to going, passive and sustainable is that there is additional cost up front. You're looking at between 10 to 20%. But when you look at that over the long term, it evens itself out. And if not, it actually pays for itself and then some.
Yeah, so what sort of savings do you think can be made over the short and long term?
Well, it's obviously depends in what type of products you implement into your home. So if you can implement, say, a 6.6 kilowatt solar system with a battery unit, you're really coming close to what we call net zero. That's only if, again, you've built your home in a passive way. So passive, that's working with and against the sun to heat and cool your home naturally. And then if you've done,
I keep hearing from my retired dad, his dream is to have a house that actually doesn't need excessive heating and cooling and is set up this way. So, I'll have to keep watching this space and maybe give him his dream in the
it's
future.
Crazy. You look at how much energy is consumed just for heating and cooling the house, and it's like 40% of your energy usage is just for heating and cooling. And, so that's, again, long term, it's not sustainable with the amount of energy we're using.
And
so,
the
savings is obviously
electricity, and that's probably only going to go one way. And until we have some major breakthroughs in, fusion technology or other things that, can give free energy to the world, which is a pipe dream until we, refine that.
That's right. So, with our homes, we pull out gas as well. So we don't have gas. So basically you're able to run all of your needs off power. And again, if you're creating the power you're using, that's how we're wanting to achieve net zero. So yeah, that's a big way, is that sort of stuff. You're obviously going to save a lot of money on your energy bills. There's also rebates on solar, and we use heat pumps, not your hot water units that are predominantly electric or gas. These are like air compressed units, and they draw real minimal power. real interesting product. And so again, rebates for using heat pumps. So there are some like upfront savings, but it's really that long term. The other thing to note is that if you get a home that is at a 7 to 7.5 star rating, you're eligible for what you call like a green home loan, which you can get 0.5% to near a full percent off your home loan, which when you take that into consideration, well, that's right. When you take that into consideration over long term, what's 0.5% off home loan over 30 years? Well, it's going to cover that 10 to 20% that you paid up front. So to help with that initial barrier into getting into it. But I think that a lot of people that we're getting phone calls from, they can afford it, but they also recognize the importance of building a home that's also going to be good for them, but good for the environment as well.
Yeah. And the way I sort of can see this whole field going is at the moment, buyers are starting to become more savvy and ask better questions when buying a house. But in Perth in general, like we're just not aware of what energy ratings are. We're very backward as a state, and it's certainly not valued by the majority of buyers. I can see a place in the future where people are going to be a lot more discerning on these, and it could significantly affect the value of your house. And obviously to go back and retrofit things is never going to have the same effect and not be as good as building them in and creating it all to be efficient from the beginning. So are you thinking that things might go that way as well?
Yeah, I'm definitely of the belief that in the not so distant future, it's just going to be the new norm. We have actually in WA the lowest energy ratings. That's on the NATAS system, the National Housing Energy Rating Scheme. And that's because a brick home is pretty much at its top limit of being able to meet that standard. If that standard keeps going up, I don't see brick homes being able to keep up pace on that. So I think that's why we're sort of there at the moment, because we do have that predominance for the double brick home. But yeah, look, it definitely comes down to what you know, and like you say, if people are becoming more savvy out there with what's in their home, that's a good place for the market to be, because then I think it comes down to our industry and definitely
we'll start
yourself
forcing the change.
Is sort of highlighting and say, well, this house, if you get a 1980s brick home, that's like a 2-star energy rating right there. And, then you put that up, stack that up against something else. It's like all of a sudden now you're comparing the actual standards. So that would be interesting. But yeah, for sure, this I think this has to be the future. And I've seen other builders, even project builders, starting to offer things that are, quote, sustainable inclusions. Like, they'll say, oh, we'll do double glazed windows, or we'll give you solar. But, they're definitely missing the huge part, which is, but they're still building double brick homes, or, they're not insulating them properly. So they're losing or gaining heaps of heat still, so that those homes still need to heat and cool themselves through mechanical air conditioning.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's for sure the future, but not until that cost can become affordable for everyone. So that's something that we're looking at working on in the future to be able to make that affordable for everyone.
And why aren't more buildings constructed this way? Like, is it the mindset around double brick, or what's your take on how we've ended up here?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting, but it's just a story of great campaigning, pitching the right product at the right time. So you look at the 60s and before, most homes in Perth were built timber frame. You go to old areas like West Perth, Subiaco, Leederville, a lot of those homes are going to be like those old ones, timber frame. But of course, they genuinely had issues back then. They were susceptible to termites, the rot damage, fires. They weren't insulated, so they were just freezing cold homes. So it was in the 70s, the brick companies recognized that their product is a better, and that's how they marketed it, and that's how everyone swapped to it. It also comes down to resources and availability. We got a lot of clay. And so they were able to do it really cost effectively. And then that mindset of all those things that they told people back then, it's sturdy, it's strong, it's not going to burn down. And the funny thing is, when I speak to people of that generation, like I was saying before, I couldn't get those older clients to change their homes to that timber. And they'll just tell me, they'll repeat to me the exact same things that they just would have heard in those campaigns or from what their parents said.
Embedded.
And it's not that they're thinking for themselves. It's just that all they're doing is that they're just repeating things that they've heard. But if they did a deep dive like I did and realized that their home could actually genuinely be built better, I think that there could be a different opinion about it. So yeah, it's just, like I said, good campaign, but I'm seeing that there's a trend that's happening, and you're seeing a lot more timber frame and even steel frame homes. And once people start seeing that, I think that those ideas and sort of almost fears around homes not a double brick, I think that they'll start reducing and people will be way more open to going to a different type of structure.
Awesome. So is there anything being done at the federal and state and local levels? Because obviously this is the direction we need to go. Is the government behind or in front in supporting this?
That's such a good question. I only know so much, and if your listeners know if there's other incentives out there, please let me know. But from what I'm really aware, the government, the only thing that they're really offering at the moment is just a rebate on the solar and the heat pumps. You do have banks that are obviously trying to do their part for going green, and that's why they're offering lower interest rates. But other than that, there's not too much that I'm aware of in terms of the government at any level pushing for this. The industry itself keeps increasing the bar. So like I was saying soon, the minimum energy rating that a home will need to achieve will be 7. That will be coming in the next couple of years. And so that's the industry body itself. So yeah, I'm not too sure what else the government is doing to be able to sort of implement either strategies or incentives for people to go passive and sustainable.
I guess they'll get to the party late, and if there's more demand and need from voters, then they'll start looking at ways to further incentivize it. And
yeah, and this is something that I was really watching is in the latest election, some around 35% of people voted with parties that had a preference for climate change. And so that's really interesting to me. So I think as the population wants more
that was very
of
notable,
this,
wasn't it?
And then I think the government will take notice of that and go, okay, well, what can we do nationally, state and locally to essentially give what the people have asked for, which is...
So how does this star energy rating work anyway? Because it can be a bit confusing to the average person, especially when we don't use it and refer to it much in WA. Only when you're building is it thrown about. But even then, for a lot of the times, it can just be a background concern and not even something looked at.
So, like I said, it's based on the NATAs, so it's National Housing Energy Rating Scheme. So that is a national. It's not just state. So it's basically the same across all states. And effectively, what they've done is they've got calculations to be able to work out basically around heat loss. How much heat will this house lose? Or gain. And so it doesn't, the thing that it doesn't really, there's a couple of things that it doesn't do, which is what passive house does. And that's work that comes around air tightness. That's super important when you're wanting to have a sustainable home. And that's the other thing it also doesn't take into account is, well, what products are being used that is going to increase the carbon emission reduction in this house. It just works on how much heat is it gaining and losing.
Okay. So it's a bit one-dimensional.
But it was a system that was made implemented in the 80s.
Previous
And it's
considerations,
it was, I think, a really great system for the time, and it has developed in time. But again, like I said, it only is working at one aspect, and that's something that I've kind of learned through all my research is it's not just one. You can't just tackle one part of the house and then you've solved it.
Tack something on and think that it's going to all work together and produce.
And it's interesting because I had this conversation with another big builder, and they were sort of saying that, can you be a sustainable builder if you just stop putting in one product that is, quite
we're doing
sustainable?
Solar panels now. We're a sustainable builder.
The big one is like Master Wall. That's a real niche product. It's, a foam board that you stick on the outside of your wall. Again, it's an insulation product. And they were sort of referencing that. It's like, well, if we're using that, can we be sustainable? It's like, well, yeah, you can have that. But if you still got 4mm glazed windows, like, well, that's where you're gaining and losing a lot of heat. If you haven't got good insulation throughout your ceiling, so it's not just by having one product, you're now all good. It's about focusing on the whole house and how it actually works. It's a bigger thing than we take into consideration a lot of the time.
Awesome. Well, it sounds like you've done lots of research and sought out some of the very best experts. You were telling me you've got one of the leading architects involved. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so when we designed our homes, we reached out to Breathe Architecture. They're actually based in Melbourne, but they're Australia's #1 sustainable designer. So we thought it was really important to work with a class act like that to be able to help bring their knowledge to the table as well. And so, if you look at our designs online, it takes in considerations like which way is your house facing, because obviously we always want it north facing, but you can't just buy a house always north facing, right? So there's other things that we can do. There's other ways that we can make that house work in a high energy efficient rating, no matter which way it's facing. So it was really awesome working with those guys because again, they just added another level of experience and knowledge to the design. And I will definitely be working with those guys in the future.
Yeah, okay. So just to round things out, I've picked up a few different sort of buzzwords throughout from what you've been saying, and I wanted to know for myself as well. Can you explain the difference between passive homes, sustainable homes, and I guess standard homes? Like, how do we start to think about them and classify them?
And, this is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I wish that there was another word that could be known that makes all of that inclusive, because the thing is that I have to use these different terms because they are segmented, and there are specific builders that will just focus on one of those things. So passive
imagine
is
the consumer out there that's like, I'm conscious of the environment. I want to do the right thing. I also want to have lower energy costs. They look at the different builders. They throw around words like exactly some of those we just laid out. But this is a passive home. This is a sustainable home. I get drawn in by those fancy words and shining lights and think that, they're making a better choice. But to what extent are they? And I guess that's why I didn't want to call myself.
Yeah, awesome, man. And that's why we didn't name the company, sustainable builder or passive builder, because we didn't want to get ourselves stuck in just one lane at all. And hopefully everyone one day just says, no, we want a second dawn product, But look, the differences are basically, so what we do is we break it down into what I call the 3 pillars, and that's around passive design, renewable energy, and sustainable materials. So your passive design, that again is, like I said before, it's about designing a house that works with and against the sun to be able to help heat and cool your home naturally. Then with renewable energy, that's really about trying to achieve what we call net zero. So it's the energy we need to use is also the energy that we produce ourselves. So moving away
going
from
off
having
grid.
to, we're close to doing it, but there's just few legal things. So we'll keep it on grid still. But
Yeah.
and then finally that sustainable materials, it's about saying, yeah, we're going to go with intentional products that reduce carbon or have taken that into consideration. So obviously timber, but also sourcing things locally. If we can keep the distribution channels short, well, then we're not having to have big transport and, all of the emissions that they create. So they're just the things that we do. So that's all encapsulated into Second Dawn. But, you can just pick one of those three things and you'd still be doing a great job and you would be building a home better. But that, from really what I've read, considered home that's going to be great for us and our future.
Yeah, awesome. Well, on that note, if people do want to get some more information on Second Dawn, we'll pop your contact details in the show notes and reach out and touch base with David, and I'm sure he can help with your next home construction. And it's something I think we should look at for investment and our personal homes. And yeah, you might be very glad you did in the future when you look at the savings you've made and the value that people then perceive in this type of building. And of course, you can't go back and retrofit some of these things. So it's better to do it from the ground up when you're building, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks, David.
Thanks so much for having me, Jared. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, mate. Just a reminder that the information discussed in this podcast is general in nature, as we don't know your specific situation. You should always seek professional advice before taking any action. For free market reports on your suburbs of interest and other helpful resources to grow your wealth, make sure you join my property investor update at investorsedge.com.au/join. And finally, make sure you're a member of our Perth Property Investment Facebook group to be part of the conversation with other like-minded investors, get help to your questions, and get a feel for what's going on out there in the market. I'll see you in the group.